Okay. And so there's a couple of main things that we are going to be talking about tonight when it comes to virtual recruitment, and a little bit about just why we chose this topic. This is a topic that we have never done in the professional development series before, but in light of the current climate of universities and learning, as well as the current climate of a lot of jobs, a lot of work is happening remotely or at home or outside of a brick and mortar workspace. So all of this summer, myself and other people on our team worked really, really hard to put together some resources that were specifically about virtual and remote professionalism. So covering everything from the job search to applying remotely to interviewing remotely, and then what it looks like to work in a virtual workspace. So thinking about that, this first workshop is all about the recruitment process and virtual recruitment. Later on this semester, there's going to be workshops that are going to be about virtual interviewing and what it looks like to take part in a virtual interview or a recorded interview, if you're familiar with what those are. But tonight we are going to be focusing strictly and solely on the recruitment and the job search process. So recruitment being from a recruiter's perspective, and then the job search and applying remotely being from your perspective. So before I jump in, I've got several slides and some content planned here, but before I jumped in, just wanted to know, did any of you have any really, really bold and really questions that you have no idea and you really, really want me to cover it before this workshop is over? Does anybody have any questions that they want to see me talk about during this workshop? Because I want to make this as useful to you as possible. If not, that's totally fine. Just wanted to give you the opportunity. If we were in a big classroom together, I always do this, so.
One thing I was going to ask with a lot of the virtual interviews, it's like basically gives you like reads you a question and then gives you 30 seconds to gather your response. What would you say is the best way to prepare for that if you A, don't know the questions going in, but B, let's say you like don't know how to answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Chris, that's a great question. And I will touch on that a little bit later in the slides when it comes to the job search and then applying for a job as well. So I will absolutely touch on that. Great question. Anybody else? Any other overarching burning questions about this topic? All right, well, please know that if in the presentation you have any questions, please feel free to use the feature of raising your hand. Does everybody know how to do that on Zoom on the participants list, where you can raise your hand and ask? Similar to, it's where the thumbs up is. Please feel free to ask questions, and then I'll leave plenty of time at the end for questions as well. Alrighty, so like I said, tonight we're going to be touching on two things primarily, and the first one is the job search. So for you as students, a huge part of your perspective of remote recruiting is going to be first off looking for a job. And in a remote and virtual space, this is going to happen entirely online. So this process has been happening for the majority online for a long time now, where there are online job boards, where you're networking through LinkedIn and other softwares and other things like that. But now more than ever, job applications are happening 100% 100% online, whereas before maybe you would meet an employer at a career fair, or maybe you would meet them at a networking event. If you're an accounting student, something at Meet the Firms, or if you're a sales student at a sales competition. Those are just some examples of different places you could meet a recruiter, but also examples of places that recruiters used to spend and will in the future also continue to spend a lot of their time and their efforts recruiting. But right now, today, it is almost fully online and in online job boards. So in this slide, you're going to see three main platforms that I want to highlight as we talk about the job search and the online job search. The first logo is for LinkedIn, and that's the blue one. The second one is the red one for Handshake. And then the last one is that green one for Glassdoor. So all of these are a little bit different, but all of them offer different job search tools for you. So some of them have features in addition to the job search, and then some of them are really just for job searching and less about researching and networking. So this first one, LinkedIn, that I want to touch on is a networking platform. If you've taken BUS 2001, you've created a profile for LinkedIn, you have gone through and made your summary and started to include some skills and some experiences on there. So LinkedIn is a networking tool primarily with a job search feature. So in that job search feature, you are able to filter according to things like geographic location. You're able to filter according to things like the title of a job, the industry, how much experience is required, and many, many more things. And you're able to see also the companies that you're looking for, who else works at that company. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But what I want to touch on now is LinkedIn is both a networking feature as well as a job search feature. The second one, Handshake, is also a networking and job search software, but it's a little bit different from LinkedIn in that it is really more so just for college students. So what that means is that you as an Appalachian student have an account as well as all other Appalachian students, and employers, thousands and thousands of employers also have accounts. And this is a place for you to have an account like LinkedIn, and for an employer to have an account, and for you all to be able to communicate with each other. But unlike LinkedIn, Handshake, all of the jobs that you see posted on Handshake and all of the employers that you are able to interact with on Handshake have been vetted and approved by an employer on campus. So rather than having to be concerned about maybe a job that isn't legitimate or a job that isn't going to have a fair pay rate or things like that, there's less concern, much less concern on Handshake, just because those jobs and employers are vetted. Again, on that job search filter, you can filter according to all of the same things you can on LinkedIn, by company, by industry, by title, by experience level, by geographic location. The third example here is Glassdoor, and Glassdoor is not a networking tool. It is an online jobs board. And there's lots of other ones like this. So if you've heard of ZipRecruiter, if you've heard of, well, my mind is drawing a blank now, but there are lots of other online job search platforms like this. Glassdoor is one of my favorites for a few reasons. One is that it has the same filters as LinkedIn and as Handshake, like I was mentioning. So you can filter according to, again, to geographic location, title, and so on and so forth. An additional feature that Glassdoor has, in addition to being a job search tool, is Glassdoor is also a place where information is stored about companies. So, for example, on Glassdoor, you're also able to look up a company of interest and see ratings and reviews from past and current employees. So if you were to look up Appalachian State University, you could see past and current reviews from employees about the university and what it's like to work for them. You can do the same for any number of employers, certainly the larger ones. It may be a little more difficult to find smaller employers, but it's a place where you can find that. The second thing that Glassdoor has in addition to its job search feature is that you are able to look up interview questions under certain positions. So, for example, we think about a lot in our office the FMAC program at Bank of America. Some of you may be interested in this. It's a really, really popular entry-level program for recent grads at Bank of America. It's a really, really popular program and they hire several students. So what has happened is different people that have interviewed for this position have gone back to Glassdoor and given examples of real interview questions that they received in the interview process of that job. So if you are, again, looking for a job at a certain place, you can also do a little bit more research, one, about what people are saying about the company, but then also you can look up some real interview questions if they're there on that database. So here is just an overview of some different job search features that there are. Any questions about those? Alrighty. All right, so next we're going to hop into some job search tips, and this is going to be the majority of our time together this afternoon. So the first job search tip we have is to take some time to see what is out there. So when we think about searching for a job, oftentimes we may, one, have a very specific idea of a very specific title of what we want, or we may have no idea at all what we're looking for. I know that when I first graduated, I was more on the camp of I have no idea what I'm looking for. And so for both sides and both of those situations and everyone that lands in between, my number one piece of advice in the job search is to simply take some time to see what's out there. Oftentimes the job search can seem really, really daunting, especially right now when it's fully online and you're not able to talk to another human right at the beginning. You're not able to talk to another human at those first steps. So give yourself some time to simply see what's out there. So I've put some suggestions here and we'll walk through those. The first is to see what companies are in the geographic area you wish to be. So if you are looking for a job in Charlotte, let's say that's a really, really popular place to be looking for a job. There's going to be companies that you know right off the bat that are in Charlotte, right? So again, Bank of America, like we talked about, or if you think about the sports teams, so the Carolina Panthers or the Hornets. So there are some really big employers in Charlotte that you're going to think of off the top of your head, but there are going to be some that perhaps you've never heard of before. So maybe take some time to see what are some employers in the geographic area that I'm looking for that I maybe have never heard of, that are great companies, may have a great Glassdoor rating, but I just have never thought to look at them because I've never heard of them. The second is to look at the titles available at these different companies. So for example, when we think about different roles within different industries, oftentimes different companies will call similar roles very different things. So for example, if you are looking for a career in sales, rather than an entry-level position being called sales position, oftentimes these positions can be called account managers, they can be called business development representatives, they can be called brand manager representatives, they can be called brand representatives, they can be called any number of things. And what is good to know about this is that the same thing doesn't look the same at all of the different companies that you may be looking at. So as you're going through and learning about new companies, allow yourself to be educated about different job titles too, because job titles are continuously changing and new job titles are being created every day as well. So not only are job titles different for different companies, but there are new jobs being created all the time as well. The next is to read the requirements, duties, and the other parts of these job descriptions. I want to emphasize this as well because, again, what a title may make a job sound like may not be what you think it is. So again, for example, when I say account manager, You may have one thing that pops into your head about management, or you may have one thing that pops into your head with certain travel expectations or certain communication expectations. But this company may have an entirely different set of these expectations under that job description. So again, regardless of the title you're looking for, be sure to read the content of that job description, because that's going to give you far, far more clues than the title is going to give you. So overall, with this job search tip, give yourself time to see what's out there. I know it's really, really tempting to say, okay, I've got to get started and I've got to make some headway and I've got to have something to show for my job search time. But give yourself, even if it's you say, okay, today in my job search, for the hour I'm sitting down at my computer, I am not going to apply to anything. I am simply just going to allow myself the space to see what's out there. Start making a list for yourself, but just give yourself the space to see what's out there. All right. This next one is playing off of the last one, and it is to use different search terms and titles. So again, a little bit from a recruiter's perspective about job titles and search terms within a job description. So if I'm a recruiter and I am creating a job description to be put out on LinkedIn, to be put out on Handshake, to be put out on whatever search engine it may be online, I am going to use the language and I'm going to use the terms that I'm familiar with, one, within my industry, but two, within my company. So like I was just touching on how different companies call different things and different jobs, different titles, or they call the same job different titles. You need to start to familiarize yourself with what the terms and the lingo of your industry are first, and then specifically familiarizing yourself with the terms and lingo of the companies that you're interested in. So here again, the pointers for this tip are to start with broad search terms. So for example, if you are looking for an internship within risk management and insurance, so maybe you're looking for an internship specifically in underwriting, or maybe you're looking for an internship specifically within brokerage. I'm not exactly sure. Whatever your interest may be, this is just an example. But start by using really, really broad terms like insurance broker or insurance intern or insurance underwriting intern or underwriting intern. So using really, really broad terms that are definitely specific to that industry, but perhaps are going to catch more things than exactly what you're looking for. The next tip is to use Boolean search logic. This is a really specific way of searching for things online. It is a way of searching for things that you can search for thinking about in research and thinking about in the library. So if you have done any research at the Appalachian Library, this is something that works there too. It's putting certain terms in quotation marks, using and or, to be able to search for multiple keywords at the same time when you're searching for a job. So you'll see on this slide that it is hyperlinked, and I am going to link these slides in the chat here at the end, so you will have access to this and be able to click on that and learn more about Boolean logic. Because we don't have enough time to really stick on it. The final piece on this is to search for the titles you discovered in your research of available companies and opportunities. So like I said, when you learn of a title that you see that was popular or common in the industry that you're looking for, be sure to use that term when you're continuing to look for your jobs. Or internships. This is all applicable for internship search as well. All right, the next tip is to save your search filters and request notifications. So when you're looking on search filters on LinkedIn, on Handshake, or Glassdoor, all of these three that I've mentioned to you, you are able to save the filters and request notifications. So like I said, Handshake, you already have an account on LinkedIn. If you've been through BUS 2001, you already have an account. And Glassdoor, you'll have to create an account, but it's free. They're not going to ask you for any money to be able to save your search and those types of things. But I would encourage you, once you have taken time first to see what's out there, and you've played with different search terms and titles and locations and companies and industry settings, and you find a couple that you really, really like, to go ahead and save those. In addition to that, request notifications however you prefer to do that. So LinkedIn, Handshake, and Glassdoor, all of them will send you a daily job search digest if you want them to. Handshake will send you text messages every time a new job is shown in your saved search feature. That sounds like my personal nightmare, but if you are really on the hunt for a job or an internship and you want a text message, Handshake will send it to you. So once you start finding where things that you're more and more interested in are popping up with your search, again, really, really similar to library research if you've done any of that. Once you see things popping up and coming into your search that you really like, and maybe you apply for it, but then it goes away and you want to see more things like that, one, absolutely save that search. So every time you're on that site, all you have to do is click that save search, but then also request notifications. All right, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this last one, but I am going to encourage you also to network. So this is a bit more difficult because it is confined just to the online space, but specifically using LinkedIn to network. So if you've got that account that maybe you created in BUS 2001 a year and a half ago, and you haven't really touched it since then, now is the perfect time. Every single recruiter that we talk to has said over and over and over that LinkedIn has been their bread and butter, but now it is even more so their bread and butter, meaning that it is their go-to place to find talent without a doubt. So go ahead and dust that off and start connecting with more classmates. So if you did take the class a while ago, you've met more people in your classes and you've met more professors, and maybe you've met more people at Business Connections. Go ahead and connect with them. Connect with your coworkers at your part-time jobs. If you've got a job on campus, connect with your supervisors that work on campus. If you have a job off campus, go ahead and connect with your colleagues there or your supervisors there as well. Connect with your friends, connect with those who are in the College of Business as well that will soon be in the workplace, and maybe even later on in your career will prove to be good networking contacts. Connect with your family, connect with your family friends. Connect with people who you know in person. You don't necessarily have to have a deep or personal relationship with them, but go ahead and connect with your acquaintances. The next is to interact with company pages and content. So one of the number one things a recruiter looks for when they are looking for talent to fill their open positions is they want to see if you have liked their company's page on LinkedIn. So most companies, even smaller sized companies, have LinkedIn pages, and you can follow them. It's a little star button that you can click. You can follow them and start interacting with that page that way. Once you start following a company page, you're going to start seeing their content show up on your news feed. So just like you see individual connections and you see their content start popping up on your newsfeed, you're going to start seeing each company's content also pop up on your newsfeed. So go ahead and follow that and then start to interact with that content. So even if that's just liking something every once in a while. And the same goes with your connections. If you see that someone has a new position, now really similarly to Facebook, you can heart something and clap for something and all of these other things on LinkedIn. It's not just a thumbs up anymore. So interact with content that people are putting out there. Consider leaving a comment, consider saying thank you for sharing or something along those lines. Any small interactions are really, really helpful for recruiters as they're looking at your overall application, who you are as a candidate. And then finally, reach out to ASU alumni. Again, if you look at this hyperlink, it's going to take you directly to the Appalachian State University page on LinkedIn, where last time I checked, there were over 90,000 App State alumni. That's like 90,000, not 19, but 90,000 alumni who work all over the world, who work in every single industry you can possibly imagine, and oftentimes want to help out their fellow mountaineers, right? So a couple of reminders: if you do reach out to an alumni, be sure that you're not asking for favors. Be sure that you're not saying, hey, do you have a job for me? But go ahead and reach out to them and say, hey, my name is Annie. I'm currently in the College of Business studying economics, and I see that you're here, and I really would love to hear more about your journey to get this position. I know you're an incredibly busy person, but if you have any time, please let me know. It's much appreciated. Thanks, Annie. Something really, really quick, short, and sweet, and to the point like that. Again, never ask for advice, never ask for a favor, but ask for advice. Oftentimes people love to be asked for advice. And again, you are at a school where a lot of mountaineers really like to look out for their own. All right, so those are the job search tips. Any questions about anything I've covered for that so far before we start talking about applying remotely? Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, yes, Caleb, go ahead.
Thank you. So for the career fair for this year, I've noticed that there's a lot of recruiters that are still coming. How is that going to affect the job search online?
That's a great question. So I think what that is going to give you is an opportunity, in addition to what everyone else, meaning everyone else that isn't in college right now, you have an extra opportunity than they do. So how the virtual career fair is going to be set up is you're going to have the opportunities to sign up for really, really short one-on-one sessions with recruiters. So that's going to be really similar to that career fair interaction. If you were to walk up to their table and say hello to them, that's just going to be you and the recruiter. It's going to be even more so to your advantage, though, because you're not going to have a lot of loud voices around you. You're not going to have a whole lot going on around you. There's not going to be a line behind you distracting you. But you're going to have the opportunity to do that. And then you're also going to have the opportunity to sign up for group sessions. So interacting with multiple recruiters at the same time, along with multiple students. So maybe you have one question that you want to ask as many recruiters in your industry as possible. Those group sessions are going to be the opportunity to do that. But back to specifically applying for jobs, those one-on-one sessions are going to be the best way for you to have your name be more recognizable, right? So it's going to be the best place for you to ask your really specific questions, to perhaps offer your LinkedIn profile link, perhaps to offer if you have any other online content to give them. That's going to be the place to do it, to give you that more personable exchange rather than going through an applicant tracking system. Did that answer your question?
One more thing about that. Will they be conducted through Handshake, or will it be through Zoom?
So through Handshake. But the platform is, the video platform on Handshake is really, really similar to Zoom in that there is this face-to-face video component, audio, screen sharing. There's a chat box as well. So it's really interactive like Zoom, but it will actually be on the Handshake site. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and they'll just pull up your resume through Handshake, correct?
Yes, they'll have access to your resume on Handshake. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure thing. Any more questions before we move on to applying remotely? All right. So once you have found a job search that works for you, once you found some terms that work for you, hopefully you're going to start finding some internships and jobs that really interest you. And there's going to be multiple ones that you want to apply for. So the first thing when you're applying for a job, and again, a lot of these tips are really transferable to other times. But again, because you're not having that in-person interaction, a handoff of the resume or a handoff of something else, these are just a little bit more catered towards the remote and virtual piece. But again, catering your resume and cover letter. So first, take some time to look closely at the job and internship description and note the keywords and phrases that you see there. So what we were talking about with the job search piece, you want to make sure that you are familiarizing yourself with the specific language and with the specific terms in use within your industry, but then also specifically within the company that you're applying for. So again, as a recruiter and from a recruiter's perspective, when I write a job description, when I write what the requirements are, when I type all of those things up, I am speaking in the language of my company. And so when I'm looking for applicants and I'm looking at applicants' materials, I'm going to be looking that they're speaking the same language as my company, right? So when I say that, I mean things about skills, I mean things about experiences, things about values even. So there are several places you can look for clues about the type of language and words and phrases to include on your resume and cover letter. Another reason I encourage you to do this is not only because when it's seen by human eyes are those details going to be noticed, but if you're applying to a larger company and your materials are being sorted through an applicant tracking system first, that applicant tracking system or that computer with algorithms it is searching through all of your application materials is going to be programmed to look for the same keywords that are in the job description. So, for example, if you read a job description that says a requirement is leadership experience, or if you see a job description where a requirement is pursuing a business degree, those are two things that you without a doubt want to make sure are on your resume and on your cover letter. For leadership, you on your resume could use keywords like lead. You could use keywords like manage. You could use keywords like train or those types of things where you're showing that you're leading and training, that you're managing other groups of people. If it's saying you're pursuing a degree, you want to make sure that your education is really, really clear on your resume. And again, in our coaching materials, we teach you to do this, but hopefully this is giving you some insight into exactly why we are telling you to include those keywords and those specific things in your resume and your cover letter. Any questions about catering those? I know that's a lot for just one slide. All righty. Next, upload your resume and cover letters as PDF files. So this is a really small, really nitpicky thing, but it is very, very important when it comes to your formatting and what you have fit on your resume or cover letter. So a lot of you, I'm sure, are formatting your resume and cover letters either on Microsoft Word or perhaps in Google Docs. Some of you may be using one of the other Mac applications. I think it's Pages. But whatever you're using to create your resume, whatever Word or document processor you're using, before you upload that resume, whether it's to a specific application or if you're uploading it to Handshake, like Caleb and I were just talking about, so employers can see it there. If you're uploading it as a document to LinkedIn, make sure that it is a PDF. And the reason we encourage you to do this is strictly for formatting. So we want to be sure that exactly how you created your resume and the spacing and the alignment and the tabs that you set and the fonts and the bolding and all of that you set to make it look so beautiful and so clean and so uniform, we want that to be transferred to what an employer sees. In addition to that, regardless of the software or the word processing software that an employer may be using, they are going to be able to download a PDF really easily, right? So if they're using a PC, if they're using a Mac, or even if they're trying to download your application materials on a mobile device, like a tablet or a smartphone or something like that, they're going to be able to see a PDF. All right. Tip number 3, answer any application questions in a separate document. So I don't remember who asked me this question at the very beginning. I apologize. But one of you asked me a question about, when it comes to virtual interviews, what is the best way to prepare? So if you're given 30 seconds or if you're given a minute and you're recording your answer, what's the best way to start thinking about and preparing those answers? And so I'm going to touch on that a little bit along with these application questions and how to answer those. So when you're answering application questions, they're most of the time going to be really, really specific. You're going to have different things to list, different experiences to tell about, those types of things. And oftentimes they're going to be longer than 1 or 2 sentences, right? So maybe they're going to be a paragraph, maybe they'll be 2, 3, 4 paragraphs, depending on the job you're applying for. And oftentimes, if you're in an application portal, it's going to be online and there's going to be text boxes that you're entering in. What I want to encourage you to do is, rather than having the primary place where you're keeping that text be in that application box, go ahead, open a separate Word document, Google Doc, blank piece of paper somewhere else, whether it's a sticky note on your desktop, whatever application you need to use, and answer those questions in that where they will be saved. 1, in case your internet goes out, or 2, if you're taking a while to really think through those questions, some applications will time out. So you're only allowed to have that page open for 30 minutes or an hour, for example, and they'll time out before you can finish completing your work and before you can save it, or maybe it won't save it at all. So when you're going through application questions, don't rush it, and start to write those answers on a separate document. To go along with that, when it comes to preparing for an interview, and when it comes to preparing for the questions that you may think you're going to receive, regardless of the type of job you interview for, like, tell me about yourself, or strengths or weaknesses, or tell me about a time you failed. There's a ton of these really common ones. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about this because my coworker Amy is going to do a workshop specifically about this in a couple weeks. But one thing you can start to do is start to think about and write out some of your experiences in the form of stories, right? So as you're filling out your application, and maybe they're asking you specific questions about technical skills, or they're asking you specific questions about teamwork, nods that you may be asked questions like that in an interview. On that Google Doc, go ahead and start writing out about a time that you had to work on a group project, or write about a time that you had to work as a team. Write about a time that your team failed and it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, but then talk about what you learned. Start thinking through examples of stories that you want to tell, whether it's in your application or whether it's in an interview. And the reason we encourage you to do that is, 1, because that refreshes your mind, right? So I may remember some details of a story, but once I really start thinking about it, I can think more and more about the details as I go on, versus having to just say it on the spot. So for both applications and interview prep, go ahead, open a Google Doc or a Word document or something like that, and start writing out your answers and start writing out your experiences. All right. Next tip. use or note where you're applying. So use a spreadsheet to remember where you're applying and the jobs that you applied for. Again, this is a super small nitpicky thing, but I can't tell you how many times I've had a student come into my office and they've said, hey, I've applied to a ton of jobs. And I'm like, okay, where? And they're like, well, I don't really remember. And I'm like, okay. Or we start looking through a search on Glassdoor and I'm like, oh, did you see this one? Did you see this one? They're like, it kind of maybe looks familiar, but I'm not exactly sure if I applied to that or not. So as you apply, go ahead and keep track. I encourage you to do this for a couple of reasons. One, if you start to apply to multiple jobs or multiple internships at the same company, you want to know that you're doing that. You want to know that you've already been in contact with a recruiter there and want to make a note of that. So if you go back to apply for a job later, or you go back to apply for another role later, you can note that you have a relationship with that company. In addition to that, I don't want you to say, oh, I think I've already applied for that when maybe you already haven't. Go ahead, keep a list of the places you're applying for. Next, apply even if you're not fully qualified. So, of course, after you graduate, you're not going to go apply for a CEO position, or you're not going to go apply for a position that requires a PhD or requires a master's degree. No, you're not going to do that. But I want you to keep in mind that even if you qualify for only most of the required criteria, and maybe you don't meet every single preferred criteria, go ahead and apply. Go ahead and go through the practice of applying. Go ahead and go through the practice of catering your resume. Go ahead through the practice of answering those questions. Go ahead and go through the practice of learning those language, because the worst thing that is going to do for you is you're going to broaden your awareness of your industry and you're going to broaden your vocabulary within that industry. So like I said, even if on a job description, maybe you meet the requirements but don't meet all of the preferred requirements, go ahead and apply. Go ahead and put yourself out there. Finally, be prepared to talk via several different media. So really similarly to what I was talking about earlier with the applicant tracking systems, more and more and more different parts of the recruiting process are becoming automated. And so that's where chatbots come in. So perhaps when you're on an application page, you might see a little box pop up at the bottom of your screen saying, hey, we're here to help you. Do you have any questions? Or something like that. Be willing to engage with companies that way. Another thing is text messaging. So more and more so recruiters are telling us that they are using text messaging to interact with students. So whereas I would say, a couple of years ago, email was the norm for that, now more and more so it's becoming text messaging. So be ready to start communicating with recruiters over text. And then other AI communication. So also thinking about recorded interviews like we touched on a couple of times during this presentation, and other ways that you may be communicating through systems that aren't necessarily a face-to-face Zoom call or a phone call or an email, which have been the norm for so long. Recruiters are starting to think outside of the box, and they're starting to think of different avenues to reach you all and the best way to reach you all. And the most relatable way to reach you all. So I want you to keep that in mind. The last thing is to create a video introduction to send to recruiters and to post on LinkedIn. This is a new feature that LinkedIn has. And again, it's linked in these slides and you'll have access to that once the workshop is over. But it's a feature where you can do a couple of different things. And one of those is recording an elevator pitch or the answer to a tell me about yourself question. Again, it's free for you to access questions and to answer them and to create these videos. It's a fairly new resource, and so I encourage you all to check that out as well. And then again, this last thing linked on the side is just a few more resources for you that are linked from external sources that I found when creating this presentation. So that is all that I have planned, and those are all the slides that I have. But does anybody have any questions? Any?
Annie, I was wondering, I know
Yeah.
like a lot of people, I've kind of already kind of just been trying to get a job search started just to kind of prepare myself. And I know a lot of people are working remotely.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that like when I was looking at who all was coming to the career fair and stuff, that a lot of those employers are, some of them are from California, like some are from Minnesota and stuff. So do you think it will be advertised if those jobs will be remote location, or I didn't know how that would work? Because I know a lot of people, like I talked to a gentleman that worked at Lowe's corporate, and he said they've pretty much told us we'll be working remotely for, you know, for the foreseeable future. So
Yeah. Sure. No, Kendra, that's a great question. My short answer to that is yes, they will absolutely let you know. So oftentimes, if you are looking at the employer on Handshake and it says that they're from California or Texas, those are just two examples, one that you said and then one off the top of my head. But if they say they're from those places, oftentimes they're still recruiting for more local positions. And if they're not, especially today, I would say a remote work situation is definitely possible, but that will without a doubt be noted, especially at the career fair. So when you look at the companies, you're going to be able to see directly which positions that they're hiring for. So they'll have live positions posted on Handshake. And if you look at those, you should be able to see the location, not just of the company, but of that role specifically. So just because the company is from one place doesn't mean that all of their opportunities and positions are going to be in that corporate office. If that makes sense.
thank you so much. It was
Yeah.
a great presentation. Thanks for the information.
Oh yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to share this link with you all so that you all can have access to it after you leave here. Any other questions? Alrighty. Well, I'll stay on here just for a couple of minutes in case if somebody does have questions or if you want to copy that link and get it to look at later. But thank you all so much for coming. This was a stellar turnout. We are thrilled that you all were here. And Jackie just shared in the chat that the presentation will be posted on YouTube. So look for that later as well. Again, if you came in late, didn't get a chance to put your name or banner ID in the chat, go ahead and do that. And yeah, come join us for more professional development series workshops. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.